Thank you for joining our digital town hall. When we organize, we win. Celebrating progressive wins in the first 100 days. We'll just take a minute or two for folks to log on. I'm Alan Barber, the Policy Director of the Progressive Caucus Action Fund, and one of your co-hosts today. Thank you again for joining us. It's now my pleasure to introduce my co-host for this event, Latasha Brown. Latasha is the co-founder of Black Voters Matter Fund and Black Voters Matter Capacity Building Institute. Latasha is an award-winning thought leader, institution builder, cultural activist and artist, and connector. She's a nationally recognized go-to expert in Black voting rights and voter suppression, Black women's empowerment, and philanthropy. Her voice is at the nexus between the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, and Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. I'm happy to be here. You know, when we organize, we win. So I'm super excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. Let's get started.
All right. It's my honor to introduce our opening special guest, Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair, Pramila Jayapal. A lifelong organizer for immigrants, civil and human rights, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal became the first South Asian American woman ever elected to the House in 2016 after serving in the Washington State Senate. She came to the United States alone at the age of 16 and later started the largest immigrant rights organization in Washington State. And she is now one of 14 immigrants serving in Congress. She currently serves on the Judiciary, Budget, and Education and Labor Committees. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
Alan, Latasha, it's so great to see you. And hey, everybody, I can't wait to have this conversation. We've got a lot to celebrate.
Indeed. Congresswoman, you came into Congress in 2017, the very beginning of the Trump administration. So these last 100 days have really been your first governing moment in Congress. But it's also been in the midst of a once-in-a-century pandemic. And in the aftermath of an insurrection by white supremacists on January 6th. And on top of all of that, there's the long-standing crises of economic inequality, climate change, and racial injustice. Congresswoman, how has Congress and the administration addressed these overlapping crises in the first 100 days?
Yeah, thanks for the question. When you go through that list of things, I have to kind of pinch myself and say, did that all really happen as it happened? I think it's hard to just wrap our heads around everything that we have been dealing with as a country. But I would say that one of the things that I feel like we should celebrate as a progressive movement is we got the House, the Senate, and the White House. And because of that, we have been able to already change the course of the direction that the country was going. And with the president, with President Biden, with the Senate, and with the House, we were able to pass an incredibly bold American Rescue Plan, a rescue plan that put $1.9 trillion. And just to put that in context, that's about 10% of GDP. So the scale of the rescue plan, which is what we needed, was really, I think, just a huge win for progressives who have always been making the case for going big and bold. Well, this rescue plan was big and bold. We got money in people's pockets, survival checks in people's pockets for $1,400. We expanded unemployment insurance again. We made sure that we implemented the child tax credit, which is going to put $3,000 to $3,600 in people's pockets for every child, depending on how old the child is, that will cut child poverty in half. Now, it was only passed for a temporary time, so now we need to extend it. We need to make it permanent. But we are showing that government can be the force for good that really addresses racial equity, economic injustice, and creates opportunity, not only in these moments of crisis, but going forward. Now, we've started to lay the groundwork also for the next set of plans that will come, the American Jobs Plan, the American Families Plan. But in this moment, right after this event, I'm going to go to one of our vaccination sites. And I'll tell you, when we walk into that vaccination site, what I see is people having hope again, people understanding that maybe we can get through this pandemic, maybe we can really make a difference. The American Rescue Plan put $20 billion into vaccine distribution, and in just 100 days, with a president that cares and a Congress that cares, we have been able to get 200 million doses into people's arms across the country. So we're starting to tackle the pandemic. Now, in addition to that, the focus on equity is long overdue. And I think the president has made it clear that this needs to be a focus of everything we do. We have been reeling from the murders that continue to happen to Black people across this country at the hands of law enforcement. We have taken a first step with the Justice and Policing Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We passed that in the House and we sent it to the Senate. But we all understand there is so much more that needs to be done if we are really going to address what is happening to Black communities, brown communities, indigenous communities across the country. In addition, the House, I'm so proud of what we've done. We've passed so much great legislation, so much necessary legislation. We have passed the PRO Act. We passed a $15 minimum wage. We have passed paycheck fairness. We have passed HR 1 to get money out of politics and to actually deal with voting rights. And we've sent all of these bills over. We passed the Equality Act. I mean, I could keep going. On just about every issue, we've actually made a significant difference. Gun reform, gun safety legislation. We've passed 2 bills and we've sent them over to the Senate. But the challenge we have, of course, is the filibuster in the Senate. So we are waiting for the Senate to act. And that is a topic I'm sure we're going to talk more about at some point. But that is also a focus of our attention, is how do we make the Senate under Democrats not controlled by Mitch McConnell and the tyranny of the minority. But we've had a packed 100 days. Very last thing I'll say is we're still dealing with the insurrection and accountability for the insurrection. We have not had it. The people that have been promoting the big lie are still out there. And this is a real challenge for us because the Republicans are refusing to have a bipartisan commission that looks at what happened on January 6th. And make no mistake, we came very close to losing our democracy on January 6th.
You know, we want to thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal, for all your leadership and the work that you've done. It seems like there has been a very busy 100 days, but we know that there's a lot of work to do to continue to go forward. And we also know that where there's progress, there's also backlash. And so, you know, as we move forward, we know that there will be resistance, you know, and it's just a lot of things that we actually have to accomplish. But movement and leadership such as yours did this, and we should celebrate this. But I'm wondering, you know, as we're talking about this first 100 days and our analysis of how much we were able to accomplish in this 100 days. What are you seeing as the next 100 days or going beyond the next 100 days? What's next?
Well, the president has laid out the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan. In our mind, they are both jobs bills. I don't think you can deal with the crisis of families who can't send their kids, who can't get childcare for their kids and therefore can't go back to work. If we're going to create a bunch of jobs, we need to make sure we're creating the infrastructure for families to take advantage of those jobs and be able to go and get those good paying union jobs. We also need to make sure that we're training up people with free community college. I would like to have free 4-year and 2-year college. And by the way, I'd like to cancel student debt. But the plan that the Biden administration has laid out is a list of big progressive priorities. So our focus for the next 100 days is we need to go bold, we need to go big, and we need to go fast. We need to get this done quickly. 5 priorities that the Congressional Progressive Caucus has laid out in this next package, what I'll call the jobs package. The first is the care economy. We need to make sure that we are funding the long-term care industry. $450 billion is what we believe needs to go in, and actually $400 billion has been included in the president's plan for long-term care. That is something that the movement did. I just want you to really know this, because this came out of the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force on Healthcare that I co-chaired last summer with Mary Kay Henry from SEIU and many others. That was an agreement we got, and guess what? we got it. It was also the first time that long-term care was included in any bill in Congress was in my Medicare for All bill, which the movement has been so incredible about supporting and pushing. So that's a huge win. In addition, paid leave. This plan needs to include paid leave, and it needs to include childcare that is for all families. No means testing and no work requirements. Two big things we've got to watch out for, because currently we are a little afraid that those are still in the childcare bill. We need to get those out. So that's the care economy that is so essential. The second priority is around housing. We want big, bold investment into housing to take care of the backlog, 70 billion just to take care of the housing backlog, and then more around making sure that everyone can access housing. Third priority is around healthcare. We believe that now is the time to lower the cost of pharmaceutical drugs so that no American is paying more for their drugs than in any other country. Why should grandma be sitting at her table and cutting drugs, her prescription pills, because she can't afford it? That's ridiculous. Why should you be choosing between paying for your insulin treatments or your cancer treatments and paying your rent? That makes no sense in the richest country in the world, and it's the greed of the pharmaceutical companies. Now, if we can negotiate savings, then our priority for healthcare is to lower the Medicare eligibility age to 60 or to 55, and to add benefits, dental, vision, and hearing into Medicare. So that's our third priority. Our fourth priority is around climate. This EJ40, Environmental Justice 40, which means 40% of the investments need to go into the communities that are most disproportionately impacted, frontline communities and workers that are most disproportionately affected. That is really critical to the Progressive Caucus, as is the idea of a big, bold civilian climate corps. So a couple of big priorities around climate. And then the fifth priority is a pathway to citizenship for essential workers. We know we need just humane immigration policy, but at a minimum, let's get our essential workers who have been carrying this country for the last year a pathway to citizenship so we can appreciate what they have done. So those are the big 5 priorities that we're working on over the next 100 days for the Progressive Caucus. And we're very excited that we have an opportunity to do this with our movement outside, with our movement inside Congress. So many of my fantastic CPC colleagues on this call that are going to also be, helping us to get this done inside.
Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. I'm excited. I'm sitting here trying to contain my excitement, but you're right on track. We so need that to really be able to center policy that centers people is so important. So thank you so much for your leadership and the leadership of the Progressive Caucus to make sure that we have a more just, equitable, and resilient nation moving forward. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you.
Great to see you as well. So, Alan?
Thanks, Latasha. And now we will turn to the next part of our conversation. We're going to go into a discussion of a just and equitable recovery. As Congresswoman Jayapal noted, we've seen communities across America, particularly Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian communities that were hit hard by the pandemic, economic recession, resurgent white supremacy, and climate change. While there's a lot to unpack in there, we're going to focus this next panel on relief for the American people and a just and equitable recovery. This is a moment of unprecedented crisis, but it's also a moment of unprecedented momentum. As people lost their jobs, their homes, and their lives, organizers across the nation fought for and won relief policies to pull families out of poverty, to keep the caregiving workforce afloat, to stop people who lost their jobs from being evicted from their homes and going hungry, to support their schools, teachers, state and local governments. In our first panel today, we're going to talk about a just and equitable recovery. Our panelists are true pioneers and leaders in the fight, not only for relief for working people in this moment, but pioneers and leaders in the fight for transformative and structural changes so that all families can thrive. We look forward to hearing from our special guest members of the House of Representatives on their work in Congress and from the incredible organizers on our panel about the policy changes their communities fought for. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. First, we're joined by Congresswoman Marie Newman, a lifelong advocate for small business, healthcare, equal rights, infrastructure, and green jobs. Congresswoman Newman is the first woman in history to represent Illinois' 3rd congressional district in the House of Representatives. She currently serves on the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, House Committee on Small Business, and as the Vice Chair of Communications for the Congressional Progressive Caucus. In her first 100 days in office, Congresswoman Newman helped pass the American Rescue Plan Act and championed provisions to lift up small businesses, bring vaccines to local communities, and build a workers' economy. Our next panelist, Ai-jen Poo, is an award-winning organizer, social innovator, author, and a leading voice in the women's movement. She's the senior advisor and board member of Care in Action, a nonprofit, nonpartisan group dedicated to fighting for dignity and fairness for the 2.5 million domestic workers in the United States. She's also the executive director of Caring Across Generations and the National Domestic Workers Alliance, the co-founder of Supermajority, the co-host of Sunstorm Podcast, and a trustee of the Ford Foundation. Our next panelist, Danielle Atkinson, is a 2020-2021 Distinguished Taconic Fellow for Community and the founding director of Mothering Justice and Mothering Justice Action Fund. Atkinson has extensive experience as a church-based electoral and community organizer, working with organizations such as America Votes, State Voices, Population Connection, and ACORN. In 2012, Ms. Atkinson founded Mothering Justice, a leadership development and advocacy organization. Atkinson's work organizing mothers has earned her numerous awards, including the Michigan Women's Progressive Caucus's Progressive Outstanding Women's Empowerment Revolutionary Award and the 2018 African American Leadership Rainwater Award. Our next panelist, Rosalba Perez, is the Secretary-Treasurer at the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 888. Rosalba was born in the Dominican Republic and migrated to the Bronx, New York. While studying in college, Rosalba joined the UFCW Local 88 staff, where she has been the liaison with Spanish-speaking members and managed the local's health and pension funds to ensure members' retirement and affordable health care. In 2020, Rosalba became the Secretary-Treasurer and worked diligently with the UFCW 888 leadership team to help improve working conditions for their ever-growing immigrant membership. This year and the last 4 years have been rough. So I'm going to turn to the panelists now and ask you to share what your communities have been through, how they are now, and what's changed in the last 100 days. Let's start with Representative Newman. Then we'll go to Danielle, Rosalba, and Ai-jen. Representative Newman, you've been a staunch advocate for the rights of working people and families. What is your take on the policy achievements of the last 100 days?
Well, I think that there's lots of hope out there. Certainly, I think we did what we said we were going to do, and that's the most important thing. Is that this majority, the Democratic majority, is delivering. We got shots in arms. We're at, I think, 240 million right now, and that's really the root solution: is making sure people are healthy and are going to remain healthy, and stop this horrifying flow of folks passing away, and get ridding and crushing this virus. And I think we are on a good path to crush the virus. We got money in pockets. We got survival checks out. We got relief vis-a-vis unemployment insurance. A child tax credit to cut poverty, and many, many more things. But what we really need to do now is shift not only our thinking and our attitude and our organizing. The amazing organizers on this call, I think this will resonate, is shift from a corporate economy to a workers' economy. We have to start thinking in terms of it's an economy for all. And the only way that you can do that is to put the focus on the worker and make sure that we are looking at things like $15 an hour, stop the crazy gap between the C-suite and the average worker in a company. That inequity is intolerable and stupid. We have to look at Medicare for all that will allow people to have what they need when they need it and not worry about needing it. And the list goes on in terms of the inequities, but that shift from a corporate economy to a workers' economy is really the only way, kind of in a fulsome, dimensionalized purview, we can move forward and really solve things like the climate crisis and gun reform, justice and policing, and all of those things. It's a framework we have to live every day. So while I'm thrilled with what we have accomplished, and I think Chairwoman Jayapal said it beautifully, that it's like pinch me. I didn't think we'd get it all done. The one thing I will say, because it's a craw on my hat right now, is that we didn't get $15 done. That $15 with cost of living adjustments and indexing, it has got to happen. And I am going to work my fingers to the bone to make sure that happens in this Congress.
Thanks so much, Congresswoman, for bringing up the fight for 15 and for all that you do in Congress. Thank you. Next, I'm going to turn to our organizers. So for the incredible organizers on this panel, we, and by this, I mean all of us who are fighting for transformative structural changes that will reshape our society into one where we can all thrive. Well, we can be pretty bad at celebrating our wins sometimes. But we've won some important pieces, and we've won because we organized, because Black, Indigenous, brown folks organized to win for our communities across the country. And we should celebrate. Because not only do these wins make a real difference for working people, they also build momentum towards even bigger changes. So I want to dig in with our organizers on the wins that each of you has fought for. Danielle, I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, with some incredible warriors. And thank you for the opportunity to just celebrate what we have done. Take a minute, take a breath, and celebrate the years, generations of hard work. So I am so excited. I'm over the moon about the work that we've done and what we have won in the first 100 days, including the expansion of the child tax credit, tremendous wins for childcare in both the ARP and the American Families Plan. I'm really excited about it. It is so important that we prioritize caregivers, because we need to center care. We need to center the people that give care in our economy, and then everybody wins. Not just us as organizers, not just the lowest paid workers, we all win. And once we see that, we're going to be a better society for it. Some really exciting things is that we have prioritized how families use money when they need resources. The child tax credit is proposed to be a monthly stipend, and we know that poverty is expensive. It's really expensive to be poor, and it charges interest. So the sooner we can get money in the pockets of working families, the sooner we are able to see the wins with people getting their lives back on track and building back better. We know that the way things were not working for us. We were living paycheck to paycheck. Our moms are talking about going to work just for the ability to pay for childcare. And those jobs offered them no protection, no ability to take time off and care for their loved ones or themselves, which means they had to choose between paying the rent or getting their coworkers sick, which is a choice nobody should have to make. So I'm excited about organizers. I'm excited about what this country is moving towards and prioritizing care.
Thanks, Danielle. Next up, we're going to turn to Rosalba. Rosalba, your members are working inside retail stores and healthcare, oftentimes in very close quarters with customers and patients, increasing the risk of COVID exposure. Can you talk briefly about the importance of access to quality PPE that helps keep people safe? How has UFCW organized to protect workers and increase workers' rights during this pandemic?
Thank you, Alan. Like you said, the kind of work our members perform makes it impossible to social distance or work from home. So the only clear line of protection is quality PPE. But unfortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a shortage of PPE. And due to that, at the beginning of the pandemic, we lost 27 members and more than 500 of them were infected. Some of these members I knew personally and worked with for years. So this is an issue that's very important to me. Members like Patricia Clay, a proud and loyal local 888 member who for 20 years worked at a healthcare facility taking care of adults with disability. She was infected at work because her employer was only providing 1 mask per week. Another example is Francisco Abreu, a member of 30 years and the nicest guy you will ever meet. His employer was not informing members of positive cases to prevent panic, which he thought would affect his production. Francisco died just 3 days after testing positive. Like most of you, we were online every day trying to buy PPE for our members. Our union reps were distributing masks and hand sanitizers. We started weekly Zoom calls with stores to identify companies where proper PPE was not being provided. We filed countless of grievances on behalf of our members who felt unsafe. We even created a special hotline for members to call with complaints. We have also used our collective bargaining power to reopen our contracts to include hazard pay, additional sick and personal time, and to keep our members employed, which is also very important. These are just some of the ways we have been helping our members during this pandemic. As we know, the pandemic is not over yet. We continue to work very hard to make sure employers are in compliance with CDC guidelines. This is what unions do. This is why union representation is important. And this is why we need the Senate to pass the PRO Act to protect workers' rights to organize. And to conclude, I would like to commend President Biden for making quality PPE a prime concern of his administration. PPE saves lives and workers should not have to go out there unprotected. And employers should not get away from the obligation to protect and save the environment for our workers. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosalba. We have so much love for you and the other essential and frontline workers who really put your lives on the line throughout this crisis and didn't have all of the support that you had initially. And it's amazing the work you've done to really support you and your coworkers through all of this. Thank you so much for all that you do. Next, we're going to turn to Ai-jen Poo. Ai-jen, there's been interest from the White House in passing legislation that would expand, restructure, and recognize the value of the care economy. How have you seen the discussions around the care economy and the rights of domestic workers shift in the last 100 days and over the course of the pandemic, for that matter?
It's been extraordinary to see, Alan, and just building off of some of what Danielle said, I think that before the pandemic, most people in this country thought about care as kind of a personal burden or responsibility. And if you somehow couldn't figure out how to afford childcare or home care for a loved one with disabilities or an elder, that it was somehow your fault and your failure, that you didn't have the right job or you didn't save or you did something wrong. And the truth of it is that we need care. Care is a public good. We need public infrastructure and public policy to support our abilities to take care of the people that we love while we're working. And in the 21st century, it's absolutely essential when most kids are growing up in households where all the adults in the household live outside of the home. And we have a huge and growing aging population in this country. We need a strong care infrastructure, including a really strong care workforce that is overwhelmingly women and women of color who are underpaid and undervalued. And I think that coming out of this pandemic, and thanks to the incredible work of so many organizations like Danielle's and the domestic workers and all the caregivers who've been organizing all over the country, we're finally in this moment where people are recognizing care is essential infrastructure. It's fundamental to our ability to work, to recover from this economy, to be able to have an equitable, sustainable economy that supports all of us. And we saw it in the rescue plan, we saw it in the American Jobs Plan and in the American Families Plan. Now we've got to get all those plans across the finish line so that we can have the kind of care infrastructure building blocks, right, that we need for the long term.
Thanks, Ajin, and thanks to you and to Danielle and to both of your organizations and the folks that you work with who've been fighting for so long to make the care economy to be as recognized, to bring it to the point where it's as recognized as much as it is right now. And you mentioned the care infrastructure. That's a great segue for us to go into my next question for Representative Newman. Representative Newman, you focused on the need to reimagine and reinvest in our nation's transportation and infrastructure. Can you talk about your work so far as a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and what you're working on next?
I would be happy to, and very excited to, because this is a huge opportunity. While we have all been through a year and a quarter of a living hell like we've never experienced, we have a huge opportunity to reinvent America as we now know it in a very intersectional way. That transportation, infrastructure, housing, our economic equities, healthcare, and racial equity all come together with certain solutions. And one of them is transportation. If we can make our transportation greener and fill transportation voids and deserts. And what I mean by that is that frequently we can't get from city to city because Amtrak doesn't go across the entire nation in high-speed rail. So creating short length and longer term high-speed rail, solving transportation deserts from a bus to a train, so workers our shift workers don't have to walk for miles to get to the next set of transportation. So making public transit universal across our nation and across every district so everybody can access it. 1. 2, we have to make it greener and healthier. So here in Chicago, we are electrifying our bus lines and we are electrifying our public transit lines in terms of rail. So, and increasing bike lanes and increasing bike trails. So everything that we do leads back to union jobs, creating a healthier environment, contemporizing and modernizing our infrastructure and our transportation, and solving transportation deserts so people can go visit their relatives or get to their job more readily and easily. And I'm excited to be a part of it.
And we're excited that you're there putting in the work for all, on behalf of all of us. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to turn to our organizers again. We're going to have a little bit of a lightning round. So each person is going to have about 1 minute to tell us what are some of the policies that would help your communities thrive. Danielle, we'll go to you first.
Okay. So, last night, President Biden said the words breathing room, and it instantly got me off of my phone and made me look up, and that those words reminded me of being a child, of my mother waking me up early to put me in my uniform for her to drive me to my godmother's house because there was a gap between my father's overnight job and when my mother had to go to work. And then I remember the washing machine breaking and my mom just exasperated about just one more thing. And if we had universal basic income, we all saw the glory of having stimulus checks when we needed them the most, but we never know when the next crisis is. And we never know when that washing machine will break. We never know when the car will break down and we're just not able to make ends meet. And so I really think the next step is for us to think about what does it mean to really give everyone in this country breathing room, regardless of who their employer is, regardless of what state they live in or how progressive their governor is. We need to really empower individuals to be able to make those decisions that are best for themselves and their family. And I really believe the next big policy should be universal basic income.
Thanks, Danielle. Rosalba, you're up.
So President Biden has done a lot of good things for immigrants. However, there's more work to be done. It is time for us to have a comprehensive immigration reform. We estimate that 20% of our members are undocumented workers. These are good, hardworking members serving their communities, paying taxes, and they deserve a pathway to citizenship. As mentioned earlier, the PRO Act, it's also needed. We are an organizing local, and we have seen firsthand how union busting strategies are successful in silencing workers from organizing, which is even more pronounced in the immigrant communities because of the fear of not being able to get another job or immigration status or language barrier. Without the PRO Act, employers will continue to violate the law without facing any real penalty. President Biden said last night that he will sign the PRO Act, so let's get it on his desk.
Indeed, let's do that. And Ajin, bring us home.
All right, I'm going to build off of where Rosalba left off and say that there are 5 million essential workers who've kept us safe through the pandemic, who are living in fear of being separated from their families because of deportation, because they don't have status here. And they should have a pathway to citizenship along with Dreamers, TPS holders, and farm workers. Let's get a path to citizenship for our essential workers. And let's build the care infrastructure we deserve in this country. Let's win $400 billion for home and community-based services to expand access to services and make every job in the home and community-based service economy a good job that you can be proud of and take pride in. Let's invest in childcare, make it affordable and accessible, and have every childcare provider have a good job. Let's have paid leave, paid family and medical leave, permanent. Let's build the care infrastructure we deserve in this country.
Thank you, Ajin, and thank you to all of our incredible panelists, Representative Newman, Ajin, Danielle, and Rosalba, for all of your work and for sharing your wisdom with us today. So this afternoon, we've only had time to scratch the surface of all the hard work that went into delivering real relief. There's so much more that's been done, and there's so much more that will continue to be done. I'm going to take a moment now to plug PCAF's recent report. When we organize, we win. 100 Days Closer to Justice, which highlights the wins and some of the 30 plus organizations that made those wins happen. You can download the report at bit.ly/100 Days Closer or at Progressive Caucus Action Fund.org. Now I'm going to hand things over to Latasha to start our next part of the discussion, long-term crises. Latasha.
Thank you, Alan. And I want to say thank you to the panelists. I don't know, Alan, if you're feeling like I am, but I'm so inspired because I think, it's really important that we have a vision of moving forward. And these women literally are not only doing the work, but they're bringing this vision into being. Like they are manifesting what a new world that is possible. So I just want to thank Representative Newman, Ajin, Danielle, and Rosalba. Thank you so much for your work that you continue to do and the vision that you have that will move us forward. When we talk about this moment, we often hear the word unprecedented, to talk about the scale of the problems that we face. There's climate change, there's white supremacy, immigration, foreign policy and violence, and discrimination against women and the LGBTQ communities. But they're far from new. We've experienced this before. And they will not subside, nor will there be a recession or the pandemic that will stop them. In fact, what we've seen is a continued attack against Asian Americans. When we're seeing the recent Indiana shooting of the Silk people, or the police shootings of Black people without action, or the recent shootings that we experienced in Atlanta, Georgia, these problems seem to be getting worse. And so before we begin this next panel, I just want to recognize what we're really talking about. What we're talking about is how do we address really big topics, white supremacy, xenophobia, climate change, global justice, so that the wins for racial and gender justice, immigrant rights, the planet, they feel smaller compared to the scope of the problem. But our communities don't need just transactions, or transactional solutions, we need transformative change. And that is still to come. And so I want to have this discussion now. Let's turn this discussion on tackling long-term crisis to some of the people that I know personally are doing it best and are leading the way. We have an incredible lineup of panelists, visionaries, organizers, and leaders in the movement for justice for all people, as well as Representative Ming, a leader for justice in the United States Congress. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists for this discussion, Representative Grace Ming, Maurice Mitchell, Nsé Ufot, and Alex Gomez. So it is my honor to welcome Congresswoman Grace Ming. Congresswoman Ming is serving her third term in the United States House of Representatives. She's representing the 6th Congressional District of New York. Representative Ming is the first Asian American member of Congress from New York and a member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee. Previously, Representative Ming served on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the House Small Business Committee. Representative Grace Ming is a champion for working families, just immigration, ending violence against women and the AAPI communities, and more. Our next panelist is Maurice Mitchell. That's my brother. I love the work, the voice, the visionary, the passion that Maurice has. He's a nationally recognized social movement strategist, a visionary leader in the movement for Black lives, and the national director of the Working Families Party. He was born and raised in New York to Caribbean working class parents. He began organizing as a teenager and has never stopped. Maurice organized with the Long Island Student Coalition for Peace and Justice, the Long Island Progressive Coalition, and the Citizens Action of New York. And he directed the New York State Civic Engagement Table before co-founding Blackbird and helping to build the movement for Black lives in the wake of the police murder of Mike Brown. Maurice took the helm of the Working Families Party as its national director in 2018. Welcome, Maurice. Our next panelist, Alejandra Gomez, who began her career as a community organizing in 2007 during racially charged criminal suppression sweeps that targeted immigrant communities. This woman is a powerhouse. Seeing the fear and the harassment her community were experiencing, Alejandra began working with the Maricopa Citizens for Safety and Accountability. Since her start in organizing, Alex has focused her work on immigration rights through large-scale civic engagement efforts that she's led, rooted in her family's immigration struggle. United We Dream National Network as a deputy organizing director. Alex has dedicated her life to a commitment to social justice and community empowerment through grassroots mobilization and currently serves as a co-executive director of the Living United for Change in Arizona. Welcome, Alex. And next, our final panelist is my sister Nsé, who I can tell you from firsthand experience is an organizer among organizers. Nsé Ufot is a chief executive officer of the New Georgia Project and its affiliate, the New Georgia Project Action Fund. Nsé leads both organizations with the goal of making it easier for every voter to engage in every election. Nsé and her team are also developing Georgia's homegrown talent by training and organizing local activists all across the state. Now, she's dedicated her life and career to working on civil, human, and workers' rights issues and leads 2 organizations whose complementary aim is to strengthen Georgia's democracy. Now, it was under Nsé's leadership that the New Georgia Project registered more than 500,000 eligible Georgians to vote. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, y'all, she has no plans of slowing down. So I just want to say welcome. Thank you to all of the panelists that are joining us today. You know, there are big topics that we've got to tackle. We're 100 days into the new administration and there's new Congress. Now, after a year of incredible upheaval, a lot has changed in the last 100 days, but a lot remains to be done. And so let's begin with a reflection on the last 100 days. You know, how are you feeling? Tell us about your work. Let's start with Representative Ming. Then we'll go to Alex, we'll come to you, Nsé, and then to Maurice. Welcome, Representative Ming.
Thanks so much, Latasha. I'm so excited to be here. This is like the Hollywood of politics and organizing. I want to thank our chairwoman, Jayapal, and to all my colleagues. I know Marie Newman was just on earlier, and so thankful to each and every one of you. I follow all of you on Twitter, not stalking you, but it's because of your work, the amazing work that you have done, Latasha and Ense in Georgia. Thank you. Your work has directly and indirectly helped us get the American Rescue Plan, which literally puts money in the pockets of working families across the country. Alejandra, I follow your organization and what you've been able to do in such a short time in Arizona. And thank you for what you did for all of us, for our country in 2020 especially. Maurice, thank you so much. Thank you for Sochi here in New York. The Working Families Party has been working hard for decades now to make our Democratic Party more accountable, transparent, and accessible to everyday people. When I first ran for office, our local Democratic establishment didn't help me, but the Working Families Party helped me. And so I give them a lot of credit for being able to have the space to do the work that I'm trying to do today. Look, yesterday as we celebrated this 100 days of the Biden-Harris administration, I'm thrilled. I'm happy. I remain so hopeful. We've gotten a lot done in 100 days. However, it's a new dawn. Dawn means the beginning. We can't forget, I cannot forget, and you all know how hard everyday people have had to work, especially over the past 4 years, and how so many of our communities have really suffered, and too many have died. They are no longer with us. And so as we recover from this pandemic, we need to make sure that we are not just returning to where we were the day before the pandemic, that we literally have to build back better to make sure that we are restoring a lot of the inequities that had already existed before the pandemic. I represent parts of Queens, New York. Everyone knows Queens because those were the pictures and the visuals of the lines and the morgues that were being established around the corners, down streets, thousands of people lining up, and we had no help. We called out to the former Trump administration for help, and we couldn't get any help. I had doctors, healthcare professionals call me from the halls of the hospital, crying to me, begging, praying that they would live to see another day as they were taking care of our fellow New Yorkers and New Americans. So yes, it's a new dawn. I'm very hopeful, thankful for a Biden administration that actually wakes up in the morning thinking of ways to help the American people. And it's because of the everyday organizers and folks that are here listening today. So thanks for all your great work.
Thank you, and thank you for your work as well. Alice, we're 100 days in. What are you feeling?
Oh my gosh. Thank you to everyone for putting this together and being able to celebrate together. So I want to thank the members of Congress for listening and for acting. But I also want to start with a message to every organizer, phone banker, activist, canvasser, and member, volunteer. These historic rollouts were because of you during these first 100 days. Your tenacity, your work, and your love. In Arizona, we received $12.3 billion from the American Rescue Plan. 1.5 million children in our state will benefit from this. $780 million is going to go to expand the child care tax credit. $2.6 billion to help public schools, and it extends increased food assistance. And like so many of us who suffered a loss or illness of a loved one due to COVID, we are now able to obtain vaccines with the support of this administration. $1.1 billion we received, like my parents and now 16-year-olds that are eligible. The Arizona community, however, is still experiencing loss of housing due to the job loss over the pandemic. And we had over 65% job loss. But Arizona received an injection of $780 million for housing assistance. So in these 100 days, while 2.2 million children of undocumented parents will benefit from these gains, we need to ensure that we continue fighting for the 9.3 million immigrants who have not been covered. And so that's the role of our organizations, to fight for those that are deeply impacted, and the very same communities that came out and marched and canvassed. Last night we heard the policies from this administration, from the Biden speech, that matter so much to our communities. So the organizing continues in these next 100 days.
Absolutely. Thank you for your work. You all did that in Arizona. So shout out to you and all the organizers there. You all were amazing. I also want to go to you, Inse. Inse, we're 100 days in. How you feeling?
Listen, I want to keep getting invited back to y'all's parties. I know we're in a celebratory mood, but I feel balanced, right? I feel like the America of the future, this sort of the Browning of America that has been written about for a lot of time, the sort of multiracial, multi-ethnic, multilingual majority that we have been preparing for is here. And their power showed up in our elections. But I have to acknowledge that every step that we take towards progress, every step that we take, every move that we make towards building power, testing our power, and flexing our power is often met with a corresponding backlash or whitelash. And we saw that in the aftermath of the January runoffs, where Georgia voters and Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff to the United States Senate. And so while I'm fiercely proud of the work that we are doing, we are also still very much fighting the good fight in defense of democracy, in defense of these tools that we need in order to continue to construct and build the America, these communities that our families deserve. And so, again, I want to make sure that I take the appropriate time to reflect on and celebrate our wins, right? That voters of color, led by Black folks, Latinos, Asian American voters, literally put the Biden agenda within grasp, within reach. And that is something to be acknowledged. That is something to be celebrated. And there's much, much more work to be done.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Maurice.
Well, thank you, Latasha. And man, I feel like so much of what I wanted to say was already said, but this is what I will say, and I'll try to be brief. We have to be able to carry two things at the same time. So we need to be able to keep our eyes on the prize and stay focused, because our tenacity, our focus, our organizing, our commitment to resisting white terror and resisting neo-fascism and resisting all of the qualities that made up Trumpism got us to this point. And I think back, so we have to keep our eyes on the prize. The second thing is, like, we need to be able to secure and recognize and celebrate our small and large victories, right? But we can't do one and not do the other, right? Because if we get drunk on the victories, especially partial victories, then we will potentially lose the gains that we gained. And one of the things that we said was that this election is a door, and it's not the destination. The destination is determined through our organizing. I think back in 2009, Barack Obama organized an electoral movement, and then that electoral movement was demobilized. Then in a few short months during the August recess, you had the far-right Tea Party movement that set our politics in the nation into a pretty radical right direction, and we're still living in the wake of that. So if we were to draw the lessons from 2009, we know that after electoral victories, we don't let up at all. We continue the fight. And when I hear Joe Biden say things like trickle-down economics never worked, when I hear him say things like white supremacy is terrorism, and when I notice that in the past bill, $1.9 trillion, the American Rescue Act, and then he's talking about $6 trillion of investments directly into people, I understand that not only did our coalition of forces help create the conditions for that victory, but our coalition of forces actually wrote that agenda. our coalition of forces wrote that speech in many ways. And we need to recognize that we are leveraging our power on the grassroots in new and important ways. And there's going to be struggles where there'll be disappointments. There'll be points where we'll be struggling with this administration. And we need to learn the nuanced ability to be able to call into question things that we disagree with and elevate the things that are actually working. And I think this momentum that we're building, we have to keep it up. We can't let up, and we need to respect the fact that there's a role for outside groups, for folks on the front lines, for folks on the grassroots to help pave the path so folks in Congress and other folks can be able to secure those victories. But those are movement victories that they're securing.
Amen. Thank you, Maurice. Thank you. That's such a fresh analysis. It's such a great analysis. Movement did that. When we work together, we win. You know, so many questions I have, but I'm going to jump right in with some questions because I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to start with you, Congresswoman Ming. You have been a leader in addressing racism and violence, you know, against Asians and Asian Americans, and a leader in fighting for the rights of refugees. Now, over the last 100 days, we've seen escalating attacks on Asian Americans. And so I'm interested in knowing, we want to know, how have you been working to curb anti-Asian discourse and violence? And how is that work connected to your work on immigration, refugee rights, and pursuing just foreign policy?
Thanks for the question. Asian Americans are really scared right now. People are telling their parents and their grandparents not to go outside, that they'll deliver the groceries. They're telling their kids they can't go outside to play, even though the weather is getting nicer. But oftentimes in this country's history, there's a history of scapegoating Asian Americans when there's ignorant fear, as we saw throughout the last year. Asian Americans have often been seen as being invisible and silent, or complete outsiders. There's so many stories that I think every Asian American kid can relate to, childhood stories of being told to go back all the time. Go back where? Like Queens, I'm from Queens. To asking how we know how to speak English. You know, people making fun of our eyes, people making fun of our food. And I will say that our muscles and vocabulary of advocacy are relatively young and new. And what I'm so thankful, and I choose to be optimistic, is that we have learned so much. And all you leaders in Georgia know this. We have learned so much from our allies in the Black and Latino and so many other represented communities who, while our numbers are small, hold our hands and guide us and walk with us, as we've seen so often in the past few months and over the last year. And this allyship is something that we have to talk about. When we can't talk about it just with our allies, we have to have those tough conversations about racism, even within our own communities. And these are probably some of the most challenging conversations. But I'm really hopeful. You know, we're working on legislation for the Department of Justice to provide more resources to local community groups. This bill passed in the Senate a few weeks ago to provide funding for the groups that have literally been on the ground, helping Asian American community members, helping them to learn how to file a report. And to take care of their social care network. And the other thing that we're working on in the longer term is curriculum. American students in this country do not get a complete teaching of what American history truly is. We did not learn enough about the Chinese Exclusion Act, about Japanese Americans being locked up, about slaves building the US Capitol, the very place where I work. And we can't focus on tearing down in the long term the walls of biases and stereotypes until our kids have a full teaching of what American history truly is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for your work. I want to go and take this question too for the organizers on the panel. You know, something that you said, Maurice, around this can't be a transactional moment. This has to be, we have to see transformative change. And so what do you think? I'm going to ask you, each of you, the organizers on the panel, what do we need to do to get real transformational change? You know, how can we use these incremental wins to get there? You know, Maurice, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to you, Insay, and then Alex next.
Yeah, that's a really great question that we probably don't have time for. So I'll try to keep it really brief. I mean, I think, look, white supremacy and challenging white supremacy, I think, should be a top priority for everybody that seeks to do big things and seeks to leverage the power of our collective sort of voice as people to do big things like be able to take on fossil fuels, or do really big things like ensure that we achieve full employment. And why I say that is that the siren song of white Christian identity and white supremacy has drawn many of our white brothers and sisters into league with corporations, with the uber wealthy, with the 1%, where they see more kinship with white billionaires than working class Black and brown folks. We need to break the back of white supremacy, and that's going to take a lot of work. But if we do that, we could create majorities, vast majorities that are stable and durable majorities to do these really, really big things. And that's not something that's going to happen overnight. That's not a proximal fight. That is a long-term fight. No way we're going to win on any of the really, really big things that we believe in. There's no way we're going to achieve structural change if we don't achieve the very deep cultural change, and if we don't do the deep organizing, so that working people can see each other across race, across rural, urban, and suburban divides, and understand that we ultimately need each other to build power requisite with the fights ahead of us and the scale of the crises that we're all experiencing. So when I think about that big question, to me, it still comes down to the topic that I think we're all kind of getting at. White supremacy is not just the bad ideas or the prejudice that some people might have in their hearts. It's a structure of power that if we don't eliminate, all of us, Black folks, Latinx folks, Asian folks, Native folks, and white folks, will end up not having the bounty of America, which is the stated mission of the far right, to consolidate their power and to ensure that none of us ever have any power. So that needs to be our focus.
I'm sorry. Insay, how can we use these incremental wins, to actually help us get there? Insay.
A year of this, y'all.
We should know better by now, right, Insay? We should be used to this, Drea, right?
Listen, I usually make it a point not to repeat the brilliance that's been shared on the same panel, but I think our brother Maurice hit it on the head when we think about the tools and the things that are needed to build transformational change. I definitely think about deep cultural change and thinking about that in all of our tactics and how we approach it. I think about the need for deep organizing and for people to have an organizing home. That it is our collective power that brings about transformational change. And so I know that, in a country where there is definitely a desire to hear about the superhero in every story, but the real way that we build power that will create transformational change and allow us to sustain that change and defend those changes against attacks is by creating movement homes, organizing homes for people. I think about, the grind, the slog that was the 9 weeks between the November general election and the January runoffs, and the dope and innovative work that Black Voters Matter did with Black folks in the rural parts of the state. The Collard Green Caucus was brilliant, leaning into the culture and the tradition of New Year's Day meals in the South and in the Black communities of having collard greens and black eyed peas, putting thousands of pounds of collard greens as a GOT effort and really connecting based off of the culture. And I think that we need to continue that. And I will lastly say that we are in an age where hot wars are super expensive and Cold War tactics. We are starting to see them be deployed in not only federal elections, but on state and local levels. So being able to combat misinformation and disinformation, I think is super, super important as we think about how to sustain the change that we want.
Thank you, Insay. Alejandra.
such amazing contributions, and I will try my hardest also not to repeat. But I do think that, I've often grappled with this question of like incremental versus transformational, and I think it's part of a continuum. It's a continuum of being able to build on your victories, and that continuum and those victories help build the momentum for our communities to be reminded of their power, for our communities to be reminded that they do have agency, and that we are maneuvering and creating space to be able to build toward long-term structural shifts. And so while we were holding in Arizona, winning in 2016, the minimum wage increase, we were also holding the victory of Trump. And so for us, that meant that we had to dig in deeper, to Maurice's point, on deep organizing, building deep roots within our communities, and having the real conversations of what's at the core of these, while continuing to build or build upon these like smaller victories, which was the minimum wage increase that we won.
And kudos, thank you, because I agree that we need mighty rivers of field drop by drop. And so, Maurice, I'm going to come to you. There's a discussion that in the next reconciliation package, the focus will be on building a green economy and addressing the existential threat of climate change. Now, there's always this perception that there's some kind of struggle, that there's incompatibility in talking about a green economy, and that we cannot simultaneously tackle climate change while we're expanding and creating good jobs and ensure racial equity. Yet this past year, what we've seen is extreme hurricanes and forest fires and electrical outages and global warming and the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Tony Madade, and Dante Wright. And of course, the COVID-19 pandemic leading to massive disruptions in jobs and income for working people. How has the Working Families Party been organizing and advocating for action on climate change as part of a movement for racial justice and good union jobs for working people?
So, Latasha, like I talked before about why we need to prioritize challenging white supremacy and how that unlocking that could allow us to actually build these transformative sort of visions. Now we've been intentionally building, to the best of our ability, a multiracial, multi-generational, and feminist type of political power for the left. And that explicitly includes, to us, this question around jobs and working people. Now, we believe all of these issues, all the issues that you talked about, are actually tied together. They're intertwined. And it shows in how we're attempting to organize. So racial equity has to be in everything. We cannot have a green economy that leads to safe environmental conditions and still be killed by the police, right? And on the flip side, defunding the police is insufficient if we're still harmed by the environment and if we don't match that defunding with investments in our communities. So for us, it's a series of both and propositions. It's about having the quality union job and a transformed vision of public safety and safe neighborhoods. In fact, we think the framing of this movement kind of tells the story of what we're trying to do. We're trying to find ways to use public policy to defund and disinvest from the things that we know harm us. So racist policing harms us. The fossil fuel economy harms us. We need to transition from these things that we know harm us and then focus on the things and invest in the things and the people and the communities that we know make us whole. So that framework in thinking about the police is the same way we should be thinking about harmful fossil fuel burning sort of economies and moving to a regenerative economy that makes us whole. That's why we're working on the Thrive Act in Congress. We hope to create a condition where we're investing $10 trillion over 10 years into making that economy shift to one that's regenerative. And if we do that, we could solve for racial justice, for gender justice, for a whole slew of things. We can invest in our communities, and that investing in the drivers of violence and the drivers of crime by making sure that our folks have good jobs, have stable conditions in their households, have communities that are thriving. So all these things are interconnected. It's about divesting from the things that harm us and investing in the things that make us whole and making sure that those investments go directly to our people.
You know, Maurice, I think that is brilliant. I think that needs to be a campaign. I mean, I was starting to write notes. I was like, yeah, to divest and defund those things that harm us in this larger frame. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think you're right. That's the intersectionality of all of the things that we're doing that ultimately is around how do we advance our communities. So thank you for that. You know, Alexandra, I want to come to you. You know, there is a crisis. We're in the midst of a crisis right now that while President Biden ended Trump attacks on DACA, he ended his Muslim and African ban and introduced the U.S. Citizen Act, which would expand citizenship to many of the 11 million undocumented people forced to live without security or basic protections during the pandemic. That was actually helped created by movement. But children are still being detained, and refugees are seeking safety right now. Families are still being separated. What's Lucha's vision for the next 100 days and beyond? How do we address this issue?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that question. Okay, so this is a very passionate subject. And I want to actually speak on something that Maurice also lifted up, right? The same system that is killing our Black brothers and sisters is the same system that is deporting our families, detaining these children. And so when I look at this issue in particular, bold, long overdue action, moral leadership, and courage is what we need within these next 100 days. And while we have seen these propositions that are bold, what we're also seeing is that there have been over 300 deportations of immigrants, disproportionately Black immigrants. And so we have heard the administration speak out against racism, but in these next 100 days, we need to make sure that we don't allow Republicans to continue holding justice accountable. We need to make sure that we hold Republicans accountable for what they are doing, but that we continue organizing, that we continue calling, that we continue canvassing, that we continue marching, and that we pass long overdue legislation.
Thank you so much, Ashe. Insay, I'm going to come to you. You know, we have in the middle of this battle, we have seen an attack, you know, on voting rights. We have seen, what do you think? We've seen the mass introduction of legislation all across in 47 different states, as I'm understanding, around the country right now. And is also true of Georgia, you know, the site of two critical Senate runoff elections. Now, our democracy is under attack and Georgia is on the front lines. What do you think we need to do to ensure that everyone's voice is heard in our democracy?
I think that people thought that once the bad orange man went away, that all of our problems would have been solved. That there was a collective sigh of relief, and folks thought like maybe we can return to something that looks like normal. Not exactly sure what normal looked like, but what we had before was also not working. For working families and for people of color and women and femmes. And immigrants across our country. And so in an attempt to, continue to push the big lie, we have seen almost 400 anti-voting bills introduced in nearly every state in our country. It is a well-funded, it is a coordinated, it is a massive and aggressive effort to make it more difficult for people to vote. And I can and enjoy talking about the policies that we want for our families so that we can live lives where we thrive. But the truth of the matter is that the right to vote is preservative of all of our other rights. And so it is absolutely important that we have a federal standard for elections, right? That there be a floor for early voting days, for drop boxes and how vote by mail is treated, that as we are working to win the things that our family needs, that we know that the democratic process is absolutely important to protect. We need to protect that infrastructure. We need to protect and preserve everyone's ability to participate in it. Period. So we need a federal standard for elections, and we need one now. I think that the second thing, as we think about how to preserve our ability to participate in our elections, to make decisions as a community, is to get rid of the filibuster. I'm not going to lie to you all. There's very small but petty part of me that would love to see some of our septuagenarian and octogenarian members of the United States Senate put on diapers and Nikes and talk for 24 hours to defend their racist and regressive policies. But the truth of the matter is that the filibuster is a relic that has been used historically to block progress, and we absolutely need to get rid of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Insay. I'm going to come back to you with the last question, Representative Maine. We've just heard about the American Families Plan from President Biden. Now, according to President Biden, this plan, is combined with the American Jobs Plan, is designed to ensure that, our economy and our nation works for working families. Does this plan actually meet the challenges that our nation and the world faces? What do you think Congress should prioritize to ensure that every family has what they need to thrive?
First, I want to echo what Nsé said about the filibuster. Our answer so far to so many of the good bills that the House has passed has been that we're waiting on the Senate. Our answer should not be an answer on process. It cannot be the same answer that we had when we didn't control the Senate 2 years ago. Working families, American families, are depending on us to act. And so if we don't get rid of the filibuster, we aren't going to be able to sufficiently and quickly pass legislation like the Justice and Policing Act, like gun safety legislation, on Dreamers, so many bills. Nsé was right. The bad orange man is gone, but he was a symptom. He wasn't the only, element that caused so much of the hurt that has been happening to our families over the years. And so the American Jobs Plan is a great start, but we have to think creatively. Like Joe Biden says, we can't just build back, we have to build back better. So as we're talking about green jobs and working with our union families, how are we being more creative and not just building the same roads and bridges that are considered infrastructure, but building more green jobs? How are we investing in our infrastructure of our care economy? And Congressman Bowman has done a lot of work on this, as Congresswoman Presley, who's here. We need to make sure that we are accounting for the so many caregivers who have lost their jobs. Even moms, 1 million moms have fallen out of the workplace. I introduced a Marshall Plan for moms that would call for a child care paid leave, 50 minimum wage, providing access to mental health services for so many of our caregivers across the country. And finally, broadband. On a good day before COVID, 12 million students did not have access to affordable broadband access to do their homework. People need it for mental health, telehealth, so much more. And so it's a great start, but we need to do a lot more.
Thank you so much. This has been such a rich and informative discussion. Now I have to wrap up this panel, but the work is far from being over. I just want to thank you, Representative Maine, for all the work that you're doing. Maurice, Alex, and Nsé, for your work for justice for all, for really bringing equity to this nation and justice, and your generosity in joining us today on this panel. Thank you. So it is my honor, as we get ready to close out. It has been a really rich discussion and a wonderful day, but it is my honor to introduce someone who I always get excited. It doesn't matter whether I see her talk on a news show, whether I see her on the halls of Congress, whether I see her in a forum such as this. I'm always excited and honored to share space with her because of what she represents as a leader, as a Black woman, as an amazing visionary. So Representative Ayanna Pressley is our special guest, and she's going to deliver the closing remarks. Congresswoman Pressley is an activist. She's a legislator, she's a survivor, and the first woman of color to be elected in Congress from Massachusetts. Throughout her career as a public servant, Congresswoman Pressley has fought to ensure that those closest to the pain are closest to the power. Driving and informing policymaking, Congresswoman Pressley has been a champion of reproductive justice. She has for justice for immigrants, consumers, aging Americans, workers, survivors of sexual violence, and for the formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated. You know, currently Congresswoman Presley serves on the House Committee on Oversight and Reform and the House Committee on Financial Services. Prior to being elected to Congress, she served on the Boston City Council for 8 years and was the first woman of color elected to the council in its 100-year history. Congresswoman, I am honored to be in this space with you again today, sister. The floor is yours.
Oh my goodness. Congresswoman, you know better than that. At least say sister Congresswoman.
Well, I said sis. I put the sister in there.
I cannot even believe that somebody thought I should be closing this out. I am so emotional. I am so glad to be this virtual table with all my siblings in movement building, in justice seeking. You know, I just want my bio to say, I'm Sandy Presley's daughter, may she rest in peace and power, and I'm a liberator. And I'm doing the work of liberation and healing with all of you good people. It is so good to be with you, Latasha. You speak so much life into this movement. And, you know, anytime I see you, feel like home. And I always immediately think of my granddaddy's storefront church, which I grew up in. You know, we love when you sing. You honor the legacy of so many before you, including Coretta Scott King,
That's right.
who sang songs for the freedom movement, right? And you remember what we used to sing in church about ain't no party like a Holy Ghost party?
Ain't no party like a Holy Ghost party.
Ain't no movement like this movement, because a righteous movement don't stop.
That's right.
Okay. So, but it is wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you again, Latasha, for that introduction. Everybody, please give this dynamic movement building sister her flowers. You know, it is, you are so appropriate to be the person to be stewarding us this evening. And it's crazy for me to be listening to everyone because I quote all of you every day. You know, so no doubt about it, right now we're in the company of so many legendary movement leaders and table shakers and truth tellers, and it's really a beautiful sight to behold. Okay, before I do anything else, I've got to acknowledge Will. That is a bad, bad man right there. Will, we love you. Thank you. Okay, and I should say, you know, I am wearing a black, green, and white striped dress. I am pecan colored, and I am wearing a purple lip and green earrings, and I have a bald head. Okay. All right. So look, we have come together tonight in the spirit of partnership, collaboration, and strategy. And, you know, I was speaking a moment ago about my grandfather. May he rest in peace and power. And my granddaddy used to so often say, you know, plan your work and work your plan. And let me tell you, that is what progressives have been doing without pause. We have not wavered. Plan your work and work your plan. We knew this election cycle was a once in a lifetime inflection point, and the people delivered a decisive mandate for change. The most marginalized met the moment. Black, brown, AAPI, indigenous, disabled, young, queer, the most marginalized met the moment. And now this movement continues to challenge all of us to do the deep, systemic, transformative, legislative work of meeting the needs of that very movement that made that victory possible. You know, last night as I was watching the joint address, I was thinking of the organizers across the nation and across generations. You know, they have brought us to this moment. You have organized and mobilized. You have made innumerable sacrifices. You have quite literally put your bodies on the line, and we have pulled each other through.
Hey.
Right? You have demanded union jobs, living wages, HCBS, paid family and medical leave, and so much more. And those are home care based services. Because of you, we have a once in a generation opportunity for government to deliver true, lasting, structural change. It is through intentional partnership and by our staying in close proximity to those most impacted that you all keep us honest. You inform our strategy, you reinforce our collective power, and now is not the time to let up. This is the time to double down. We might be in the midst of a culture shift, but what we need in this moment demands is a power shift resulting in a policy shift. And that is why I'm so glad we've gathered tonight to reflect on our shared victories, to speak life into one another, and to fortify ourselves for the fights ahead. There is no glory in playing small. We must be disciplined and strategic and unapologetic in our boldness. I believe deeply that we can build an America that is more just at its core. And that's what we're trying to get to the root, right? We often quote Angela Y. Davis, right? To be radical is to get to the root. And that is what this moment demands, is that we get to the root. I do believe another world is possible. An America where I don't fear for my husband every time he gets behind the wheel of a car. An America where Black families can live free from fear and torment, and bring to bear our full brilliance and contributions. An America where folks with disabilities can receive the care that they need in their home. An America where everyone has clean water to drink and fresh air to breathe. Another world is possible. Remember our dear sister Amanda Gorman, what she said in her inaugural poem? We do not seek to be a more perfect union. We seek to be a more purposed union. How can we be a more purposed union if everyone cannot bring to bear their contributions? So as I close, I just want to thank all of you for what you've already done, what we've already done together, affirm what it is that we will do together. And then I want to close with something that I think is so important to offer in organizing and activist and movement building spaces. And that is, people often misunderstand us and our righteous indignation. They don't always get that righteous indignation is rooted in and born out of a radical love, a love of community, a love of justice. So we should continue to hold space for that righteous rage. I stay uncomfortable on purpose so that I never grow complacent. Hold space for that righteous indignation. Continue to be radical and bold in that which we demand and that we organize for. This bad, brilliant sister I know named Latasha Brown said, organized power is realized power. So we have to keep organizing for that radical, deep systemic work and change. But I need you all to also hold space for your radical joy and your healing. I need to say this. I don't want you to be joyful so that you can do more labor. I'm not seeking for you to intentionally inform and preserve your joy for utility. I want you to be as radical in your joy and your healing because you deserve it. And if we are going to do the work of creating an America where people can unapologetically and authentically show up just as they are, guess what? You deserve to do the same thing. So I hope that all of you will extend to yourself the same grace that you do for all those that we fight for every single day. And look, we're powerful. We are powerful. I believe in the power of us and the state of our movement. It is strong.
Sister, Congresswoman, representative, leader, Black woman, warrior, Ayanna Pressley, I had to literally go on mute because I was like, I am an amen corner because I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, right? So I was like, I have an amen corner over here. You are on fire. You got me lit on fire. Thank you so much for your service, but thank you for always leading with such clarity, with love. You always lead, with love and light. And it's that light that is going to disrupt the darkness. So thank you for who you are and who you have been and continue to be for our community and for the world.
Thank you, sis. Love you all so much.
Love you as well. Alan, I think we've come to the end of our day. I don't know if you feel like me, but I'm ready to, I'm ready to move to Boston. So Congresswoman Presley can be my representative. But I am ready to put these shoes back on and let's go hit these streets.
Absolutely. Just like Representative Presley told us, I'm going to make sure that I hold space and I'm going to be present in my radical joy as this fight continues.
That's right.
I do want to say really quickly, in addition to this event today with this amazing, absolutely incredible group of movement leaders, organizers, and special guest members of Congress, the Progressive Caucus Action Fund created this amazing report and video series that accompanies this so that the story of how organizers built power to achieve real relief gets told. You can watch these videos and download our report, When We Organize, We Win. Movement leaders break down progressive wins in the first 100 days at our website, progressivecaucusactionfund.org. You'll also be able to find it on our Facebook and Twitter at We Act for Progress. With that, Latasha, I'm going to turn it over to you because nobody can close this out and take us home like you can. So I'm going to give you the mic.
I just want to say thank you to our incredible panelists. I don't know about you all, but this has been such a rich discussion. When we talk about leadership in this nation, these are my leaders. These are people who are literally shaping this radical reimagining. They are creating both the grace and the space for us to move forward. And so I also want to thank the amazing team of act.tv and especially Billy Sanders for providing the interpretation. Billy, you've been throwing down over there. And the Progressive Caucus Action Fund for hosting. And lastly, thank you for everyone who joined us today. Well, the first thing I did right was the day I started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize and hold on, hold on. We just got to hold on, family. Let's do the work. When we work together, we win.